What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazique, aka Unique Mazique, and it is my pleasure to speak to Ash Habib. He is the head of the studio for Steel City Interactive, which is the studio that is responsible for bringing boxing back to gamers with Undisputed. How you doing today, Ash?
I'm very well, thanks, Brian. Great to speak with you again.
Yes, man. I have been writing about this game and talking about this game since it was it was a game of such a small project that was like almost like a top down look at from a boxing standpoint, maybe with a little bit of a tilt. But I'm gonna tell you something, Ash. I don't know what it was about you and about the way the game was first kind of presented. I've seen a lot of boxing projects start, but almost none of them ever finish. There was something about this one that I said to me, this one's going to be finished. I didn't think it was going to end up looking the way it looks now, but I said I think they're going to finish it. What do you think? Talk about the journey of where that started and then where we are now here with the game releasing for the people who pre-ordered the WBC edition on October 8th and then worldwide on October 11th.
Um, so I think uh, going from a startup and essentially, it being a passion project, I was well aware of the fact that in those early days, there were many moments where this could have just stopped. This could have fallen apart for many, many reasons, like most new businesses kind of start out with, right? I think making a game in many ways isn't any different to starting out in your own business. And I think for for me in the beginning, um, I needed to like for me it was all or nothing. Like it wasn't something that I could only put half my time and effort into. Um, so yeah, I had to basically put absolutely everything into this, and I think doing it that way almost made sure that I did everything in my power to make sure that this thing would keep going and that I found new avenues. I mean, as a CEO, or even back in those early days, I learned very quickly that I could not rely on plan A. I needed to have a plan B, C, D, E, and F. Because like 9 times out of 10, it was plan E or plan F that got me out of the hole. Um, and I remember very clearly to this day when I left my company that I was working for, my old manager, when I told him I'm leaving, he said, well, you've got a job here for life anytime you want to come back. And for me, I didn't want to hear that because like I'm putting everything into this. And for me to take it to that next step, like I wanted to do it without any safety nets. Because then even though the risk was higher, I just felt like I'm gonna be willing to do things and make this work without thinking, oh, you know what? If this falls down after 6 months or a year, I'll just go back to doing what I was doing, right? So everything was on the line, the house, the car, everything. And for me, that's how I needed it to be. Um, because yeah, it just drove me even further to make sure that this wasn't going to fail.
Yeah, I think that was kind of probably I could sense that from the beginning. And so a lot of people have not had an opportunity to have, most people have not, who are going to be playing this game, has not had an opportunity to speak to you as often as I have. Uh, I'm gonna tell y'all something, and I have never actually even said this to Ash. You're not gonna outwork this dude. I have been around a lot of people in my life, and there's certain people that I meet, and I say to myself, "Y'all not gonna outwork him. Or you're not gonna outwork her." And that's the kind of mentality, that's the kind of approach I've detected from him from the beginning. So I think that's part of, and something about that always endears me to people who are doing a project. That's one of the reasons why I get behind certain fighters. And I think that I look at fighters the same way because I think one of our first conversations was about boxing and not even the game, just about boxing. We were talking about fighters and fighters we liked, fighters we admired. And so I want people to kind of hear you talk some boxing too, because I think that's part of it. For boxing fans, we want to know that the person that's steering the engine for our boxing video game loves the sweet science. So talk a little bit about your journey with the sport and how, how we ended up here.
So I appreciate you saying that, Brian. I think, being a boxing fan, really started out when I was, much younger. My eldest brother, Asif, I remember him talking about, cocaines, in the 80s, or I guess back in the heyday. And also, Muhammad Ali was a big name in the household where, any of the interviews that I used to do, over here in the UK and Parkinson, um, I think for me, like boxing has kind of always been there, through the various eras, right? And I think, growing up, that's kind of what I suppose, boxing interest or background was. But I didn't really fully get into sport until, I guess the likes of like Prince Nassim, Ahmed, obviously from Sheffield as well, and that connection. Um, I think when he brought the glamour and the show business to the sport, I think that kind of drew me in as well. And obviously, the Mike Tyson, Frank Bruno's, and watching those fights, growing up. But I think for me, the point that turned me into a bit of a fanatic was, kind of like Princess Team triggered that, and then I think the real moment was the Gatti Ward fight. Like that's what really kind of got me hooked into boxing. Um, so yeah, after the Gatti Ward fight, it was almost like every single fight I was interested in who was fighting, and trying to watch the fights, and some great memories from watching, Carl Crotch and Jermaine Taylor live, like I
Mhm.
don't know, 4 a.m., 5 a.m., whatever time it was in the UK. So yeah, I've kind of been hooked on boxing ever since those days.
Yeah, it's something how boxing is that way. The first fight, I'm about to show my age. The first fight I ever saw live was John the Beast Mugabe and Marvin Hagler, and I was like a little kid, and I'm like, is this real? Like this, they do this, and so it's kind of like a little bit of a high. You see a great fight like that, and you keep watching every weekend because you're chasing the Mugabe Hagler high, just like you chasing the Gotti Ward high. So it's kind of
Yep.
a thing, and so that's why we appreciate so much when we see a fight like that, and that's why I try to tell people appreciate the fights where it didn't seem like it was that much action. Appreciate those because there's something in those too. But when you get your Gotti Ward, when you get your Mugabe Hagler, you'll appreciate it all the more. So I really like that you brought that up and that you said that. So let's talk specifically about the gameplay. What was your philosophy here as you approached the gameplay concept?
I think having played many boxing games over the last 20, 30 years, um, I felt like each game was like an improvement or an iteration upon the various series that have come before us. Um, but I always felt like, so I've been a big fan of football games, soccer games, and you know I've always liked the fact that they had the authenticity in there in terms of the licenses, the bodies that are involved in the sport. And I guess as a boxing fan, it was always frustrating that, there was a lot of fictional things that were happening in boxing games, fictional belts or whatever it was. So for me, like I wanted to bring the authenticity into the game. So that was a real important point for me. Like, whether it's having BoxRec or CompuBox or the WBC involved. But also, another key pillar for me was around, um, you know, making it feel like a chess match. And, on a philosophical level, that's quite an easy thing to say, right? I want to make a game or boxing game where it feels like a chess match. And to put that into practice is, you know, a whole different, a whole different game in itself. Um, but, that's something that I always wanted to stick by. Like, I didn't want to deviate from, making this a boxing fans game where, yeah, sure, you can go in and, you know, button mash and try and throw, 100 punches around. But if you come up against a good player, then the game is designed in a way that you will be punished, just how a fighter, I guess, would be in real life. So for me, the philosophy around making sure that we're staying true to the sport, the fact that you can punch in 4 different directions, with almost 70 punches, and grounding it around the movement of the fighter in terms of shifting that weight. So there was many aspects to the game which for me had to all center around in-ring action, like from gameplay point of view. And I guess I'll briefly go over why I chose this role as well, because back in the early days, I thought, okay, we're a no-name studio. Nobody said it was like I don't have the millions that all these other big studios have to make games. I haven't got all the big licenses. I haven't got amazing visuals. So I have to put all my focus into gameplay. So the very first building blocks for the game were 100% gameplay. Like everything around how we were basically gonna do the combat mechanics, the movement, the punches, all of that kind of stuff. And for us, it was really just about making sure that like we get heard, right? So there's games get released all the time, and if we just release a game that's average or the gameplay is average, again, because we don't have all the things that I said studios spend the money on, we're just going to get drowned out. So for me, I thought the only thing that's going to get us noticed is something like an amazing footwork system for the gameplay that we've got. So that was always the cornerstone of our studio. And organically, and just I guess as we've gotten more successful, um, the licenses came, the visuals came, the investment came. So for me, it was almost like a perfect storm of like I'm so happy that we stuck to and decided to go gameplay first and everything else second.
Yeah. Now it's a boxing game, but this really sounds a lot like an old baseball adage. If you build it, they will come. And it's kind of like, so you built the foundation of a gameplay centric game, and then the bells and the whistles kind of came around that. So I'm going to ask you some specific things about gameplay in a second, but I want to kind of like use this as an overview of the game for people who are, this is their introduction. I've been playing it for more than a week now on console, and I played it through early access when it was on Steam. So I'm very well acquainted with the game, but I want to give like a brief little bit of a synopsis of a couple different things. So let's talk about features. When the game launches, it has quick play, it has online quick play, it has quick play ranked, it has a feature called prize fights, and it has career mode. So talk a little bit about like I specifically want to talk about prize fights and kind of let people understand where that fits in the overall focus of the game.
Um, so yeah, I think in terms of the game modes we've got in Undisputed, obviously it was important that we had those core features, right? Whether it's couch co-op, whether it's online play, or whether it's career mode, and we just wanted to kind of expand on that, right? And Price Fights was one of those areas where you know we kind of build Undisputed as a game where you can have those fantasy matchups that never existed in the sport because of politics and whatever reason. And for us, like Price Fights was a way to be able to do that and to try and have it something a little bit more than just going into a quick fight and selecting the fights that you want to play as. But also, like we feel like Undisputed for competitive players and people who want to learn the mechanics, that was also a way for us to kind of introduce new challenges to players. Like, going into a fight where, you're starting out, the health is going to be low, or you're coming up against what might be a bit of a mismatch, in terms of that fight. So for us, it was try to test kind of players' skill levels. And obviously with the AI changes we've made, for version one launch, we feel like it's added another layer of complexity to prize fights now where you try a prize fight on undisputed difficulty, where you're choosing a character who isn't as highly rated as your opponent. I just feel like it adds another layer of difficulty and even achievement. But again, I think this for us was almost a stake in the ground, right? This for us, it's literally the first attempt at making undisputed, and I think the studio what we're focused on right now is like we've launched or very soon to launch on the 11th, and we want to use that as our foundation to then build upon prize fights, build upon our online ranks, build upon career mode. So for us, it's all about the things that, the feedback that we get from players and how we can expand on what we started because, prize fights is something that, we're excited about in terms of how we can further build this out.
Yeah. the thing about prize fights, when I looked at it, the first thing I thought about was like, this is like a live event structure, right? So, say for instance, and I don't even know if this is coming, maybe I'm thinking ahead, but I'm thinking like, Fury Usyk won. There's that moment where Usyk got Fury hurt and Fury's just bouncing from corner to corner. He's trying to get himself back together. You get dropped right in the middle of that moment, and you get a chance to be either Fury or Usyk. Can you finish him? If you're Usyk, can you recover and win the fight? Which neither thing actually happened. Usyk didn't finish him there, and Fury didn't come back and win the fight. So that's like a moment. Am I kind of, if do I have the right idea with that? Would it function that way?
I mean, that is something absolutely that we would love to look at. And I think for us, the foundation of price fights was to kind of let's get it going, let's see what the feedback is around it, and then how can we improve it. And then absolutely there could be fights that will take place. Let's say Fury Usyk December 21st, and a specific moment that happens in that fight. Then would we be able to do something whereby as you said, like you take over the fight from the point you know Fury's been knocked down or Usyk's been knocked down, and see what happens there. So we do have the ability to have it start like from a specific round, where health and stamina might be a certain level. So yeah, I think ideas like that, and where we can expand the features and game modes, not just specifically for prize fighters. That is something that we'd absolutely love to do.
Awesome, awesome. Now, let's talk about the roster. So I wrote a piece recently. Went through the roster like with a fine tooth comb, looking at everything, looking at the concept of traits, which I love. It is such a way to go beyond the attributes and to kind of better capture who a person like really is as a fighter. Guys like Canelo Alvarez who back punish the body, they have traits that augment that part of their game. But right now, there's 81 unique fighters at launch, and then there's multiple people who have different versions of themselves, or they're available in different weight classes. Talk about what your philosophy was when you were putting this roster together.
So again, as looking at it from a boxing fan standpoint, it wasn't just about the big names. I think for me, around whether they're Muhammad Ali or Canelo or Tyson Fury, I think for me it was part of that was around like fighters like Kevin Kelly. Big fan of Kevin, and I thought even some of the British fighters that have never been in a boxing game, like Nigel Benn, Carl Froch. Like for me, it was about trying to, I guess, just maybe not so much giving back to the sport, giving back to the fighters, but also like yeah, as a boxing fan, it was almost a blank canvas. Originally, it's not right. You know what? As a fan, who would, if there was a boxing game, who would I like to see him? And for me, that's kind of how this came about. And we've gone all the way back to like Jack Dempsey, Jack Johnson, going through all the different eras. And that in itself has been you know, um, a humongous challenge to try and have all these fighters in the game. And that's not something we haven't stopped yet, right? There's still fighters to come into Undisputed. But yeah, the philosophy was around basically if you're a boxing fan, there is somebody in this game for you. Like it's not just about the superstars, it's about the up and comers. It's about, I'm not going to call them journeymen, but people who haven't got, stellar records. Just, they're in there because of the passion for the sport. They're, excited to watch. And, I guess in some ways it was an opportunity for me to be able to give back to the families. Because I think boxing as a sport is probably one of the few sports where once a fighter retires, there's actually very little support for fighters financially. Um, and that for us at the studio is amazing for us to be able to do, where we can help retired fighters with an income. And for me, that's also been a part of like why we've signed some of the fighters we've signed.
Yeah, I definitely love to see that. I love to see, especially when I saw Riddick Bowe in the game. I was like, that's dope. That's dope because I've had an opportunity to speak to Riddick, and I know that's likely could be an impact, and I love to see things like that. Um, I gotta ask this question. You guys have set this up in a way where the expectation from the beginning is that this game is going to grow while it's out. DLC with some paid DLC, some free DLC updates, and then consistent title updates to change, that'll update the game based off of feedback, maybe even based off of things that you guys wanted to have in at launch, and you're like, hey, we'll get that in another update. So can you kind of give us, if possible, a little bit of a window into what people can expect? Are there specific fighters that you one or two you can throw out and say that guy or girl is coming? Watch for it, and that it's coming. Even if it's not a date, that you could give something like that about like because we know the roster is going to continue to expand.
Um, so I guess in terms of what's coming, you're right with regards to fighters and even some gameplay elements that we want to introduce. So like I know, for example, like robes have been a big thing, right? In terms of fans wanting to see fighters in ring robes, coming out wearing robes. So that's in our pipeline as far as future update goes. And yeah, look, I mean, in terms of fighters, I guess what I can say is there will be some big names coming. That's for certain. And whether they're in specific themes or not, I can't really go into too much detail. But what I can say, there'll be some big names coming. There'll be some, I guess I can say there'll be some Mexican fighters coming. So yeah, I mean we've got a big roster, right? So for me, it's just a case of trying to make sure that we're getting as many fighters in as we can. I mean, look, there's some fighters that I've signed like 4 years ago, right? Who haven't made it into day one, and I think for us it's just about making sure that we've got a good order for these fighters to come in. But it's tricky, trying to kind of fit everybody into a level and a high standard that we've got. Because one thing I don't want to do is make these fighters feel like they're just different skins. And we want to make sure that we're doing justice to these fighters as well. So whether it's a lesser known fighter or a AAA fighter, like I want to make sure we give them or try and give them the same amount of love and attention. So we've set the standard and bar pretty high. So for us, it's just about making sure that we've got a good cadence of fighters coming in at the level and quality that we want. But yeah, as far as updates go, we're going to use this launch period as a way to get feedback from fans to find out, what are any of the urgent issues they are. Because I think as a game studio, and what I've seen with the games is like, you can't be too set in your ways, right? You can't have a plan to say, hey, we're going to do this DLC in 6 months or 3 months or whatever that looks like, and be so like stubbornly tied to that DLC. Because if you've launched and there's 50 things that people don't like about your game, I don't care what we're going to be putting in the next DLC, right? We need to go and fix these 50 things that people care about. So I don't want to, I don't want us to be a tone deaf studio. I don't think we have been with early access. We have
Mm-hmm.
taken on board. So yeah, the early part is going to be a key driver for us in terms of things that we will improve and will change. Again, it'll depend on feedback from the community. But yeah, everything in the game is kind of going to be open for that. We'll have some updates to career mode and, things like that as well. So I think, that's, we're going to be, hard at work, essentially fixing, updating and putting new content in.
Yeah, I gotta ask it because it's what I'm hearing when when I publish something. I'm hearing people asking for Floyd, of course. People are asking for Manny. There's people asking for Mike Tyson. There's obviously Javante Davis request. There's Devin Haney request. You answered the question about Ryan Garcia, why he wasn't out. And I think there was a statement that was released. Basically, he was in the game. If you played early access, he was there. But because he's suspended by the WBC and Undisputed is following the lead of WBC, that's why he's not in at this time. I guess that'll be revisited once he's reinstated. I would assume something to that effect. Is that a good assumption?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I'm a big fan of Ryan Garcia, right? In terms of what he's done in the sport, but I think it's just a scenario where it's a tough one, right? I'd love for him to get back into boxing. I'd love for him to for the WBC to lift that suspension once they deem it appropriate, and he's on that path towards being somebody who can represent the WBC. And I think for us, we're hoping that's what happens. And he does come back into undisputed when that does happen. So I think just again, it's part of us giving back to fighters and the sport itself. Like I've spoken to the studio about this topic as well, right? Where if someone's going through some issues or some challenges, then we'd like to think we're people who would help people going through that particular process, crisis or whatever might be happening. But we also feel like as a studio there has to be a line in terms of what what's deemed acceptable. And I think just following the WBC's lead on this is something that we've a position we've taken. And look, I've taken a lot of stick for this, right? But yeah, look, I'm hoping it's a scenario that could be turned around. Um, and yeah, I think just in that space, the other fighters, look, I mean, I gave an interview, I think not so long ago about, one of them asking for $10 million up front. And, I've probably tried harder than anyone else on the planet to try and get everybody into the game. But when you get a request like that, it's difficult to try and, you know, make that work. Like I can go to, um, various people and say, can we'd love to you to be in this game, but there's only so many times you can try that approach. Um, I mean, all the names you've mentioned there, like I'd love to have them in. Some of them we're in negotiations with already. And hopefully we'll have some more people coming into Undisputed.
Yeah, like with those names there, obviously any of those names would be humongous additions. I didn't mention Naoya Inoue. I don't know if he's on the radar. I would hope he is. Um, and also there's another name. So I spoke to this person specifically myself over the last couple of days because I thought I was like, man, I don't know why he's not in there. But Tim Bradley is was there an interest to have Tim Bradley in, or how does that work?
So we have Tim Bradley signed into the game.
Okay,
Um,
okay,
but yeah, he was part of a group of fighters that we signed quite a while ago. So
okay,
so he is on the roster. He's in our pipeline, but I can't give any specific dates on Tim Bradley coming in just yet.
okay. So there were some videos. There was a series of them that were coming out like every so often, and I think this was even back before we switched from Esports Boxing Club to Undisputed. Is it safe to say that all of those people that were mentioned are those people are coming to Undisputed at some point in time, or is it kind of like a new slate?
So right now we're figuring out that roadmap, what it looks like for all those fighters. Um, and that's what I was saying earlier about making sure that we're doing justice to these guys with the
Mhm.
I guess the quality of the level that we've now reached in terms of the fighters who're dropping into the game. So right now all the fighters that we've announced previously, absolutely they are on the roster. They are people who've signed into the game. So right now it's just in terms of like okay when can we physically fit all these fighters into the game. So we'll be like releasing more information on that, as the DLC drop, as the roadmap comes out. Um, so yeah, uh, I guess sometimes with fighters, because it has been a few years when we signed some of these fighters, and a name change doesn't help. I mean, we had who did we have? I think we had Ray Ford ask a question about, are you in the next, new boxing game that's coming out? And he said yes. But the question wasn't about Undisputed. It was about some completely different boxing game. But yeah, he just got mixed up in terms of what game he was talking about. So yeah, I guess it's not so much of a surprise that some fighters aren't maybe sure of whether they're going to be in or not.
Okay, all right, cool, awesome. So Xander Zayas, uh, great Puerto Rican prospect. He's ranked in two or three different government by two or three different governing bodies. One of my personal favorite fighters. Are there any conversation talk about that?
I think he's a great fighter, and yeah, look, I'm good friends with Peter Khan. So yeah, we're hoping we can do something in that space.
Definitely, definitely. I had to ask that because Peter's a mutual friend of ours, so I would love to see Xander in the game. Love to see Peter in the game. I think, man. Is there? I know we only have one or two more questions. Is there any thought about expanding out the female roster as well? Because there's right now is Michaela Mayer's not there, Sandy Ryan isn't there, and they had an amazing. I would almost want to say that fight was even better than Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor. But Amanda Serrano also is not in the game right now. Are we talking about expanding the female roster as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So expanding the female rosters on the cards. But again, it's just a case of making sure we can, make these agreements work as well. We have we have Sandy Ryan in Undisputed, so she signed to the roster. So we're excited about Sandy coming on. And look, we're in negotiations with some other fighters as well, but it is difficult when you get a request. Obviously, I'm not gonna mention any names, but we got a request to say, hey, this fighter, she's only gonna come to the game if she's given exactly the same amount that Canelo's been paid, and that was a pretty tough negotiation. Like it's not something it's just not going to be possible really to do that. But look, it's not for lack of trying on our part, right? Like pretty much every name you've said on in this interview, we've reached out to. But when we
Yeah,
get a response that yeah, she's not going to be in unless she's paid the same amount as Canelo, we can't take that further.
yeah. No, I understand that. I understand that. And any of you, or any of us who've ever dealt with fighters, that kind of a request can happen. So you just kind of know it. So Ashton, man, it was my pleasure talking to you today, man. I'm gonna let you go. We've been talking so long, I think the time of day has changed behind you. So so
Always a pleasure, man.
yes, absolutely, man. We'll talk again. And yeah, hopefully we'll be talking about Undisputed 2 and moving forward. So, all right, man. I appreciate your time, man, and we will talk.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Appreciate it.
All
Thank
right,
you.
peace.